Very much, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure to rise today and support Bill C-26 at second reading. I think, we've heard that there is quite a difference of opinion in the House in terms of the advisability of this bill. Maybe we can start from a place that we do all agree on, I think, which is that it doesn't serve the Canadian economy well, and it certainly doesn't serve Canadian seniors well to have them retire into poverty. And so we have to find a way to make sure that unless people are going to work their entire life until they drop, we project that there will be a period, Mr. Speaker, where they're not working for their income, either because that income is coming, well, it's got to come from somewhere, and if it's not coming from the fact that they're still going into work every morning, then it has to be that either they saved that money on their own or through a mechanism like the Canada Pension Plan, or it's coming from some other kind of benefit if it's not coming from their working family members. That's the kind of system. I mean, the kind of system projected by the Conservatives when we talk about individual savings is a kind of system that we once had, and it was the case that people who were past their working life had to be supported by their family members, and that was great for those who had family members that could support them, and it was very bad for those who didn't. So the CPP was by far and away an improvement on that situation where people could manage to save for themselves throughout their working life, and things like the OAS and GIS were important for that too. So there is a need for income in retirement. We can all agree on that. The gold standard for that would be some kind of guaranteed annual income in retirement, I think it's fair to say. But in the absence of us being a country that provides in that way, the Canada Pension Plan has been a great mechanism for working Canadians to make sure that they do have at least a basic income when they retire. And it was based on kind of three pillars, if you will, Mr. Speaker. It was based on the idea that there would be a CPP there to provide about a third of what you might need in retirement, that your company pension plan would provide another third, and that your personal savings would provide the final third. And in Canada today, we're in a situation where two of those pillars are in serious jeopardy. We know that almost 7 out of 10 Canadians working today don't have a company pension, so that's a third of that retirement income scheme gone. And we know that most working Canadians are struggling very hard to save. Many are living paycheck to paycheck, and so they're not able to save to the extent that they need in order to be able to furnish a third of their retirement income once they're no longer working, Mr. Speaker. And that's why there's a need to enhance the first pillar, which is the public pension, because it has to do more work, in our view, Mr. Speaker, in order to make up for the problems in realizing the potential of those other two pillars. Now, it seems to me, Mr. Speaker, that if you were a financial advisor or you were approached by your financial advisor who said, there's a plan, there's all these various plans, but one plan has 40 million people in it, everyone in the country, it's fully portable, and particularly in an age where people are having a hard time finding a job that will last the 20, 25, 30, 35 years that you need, even if it did have a company pension plan, in order to kind of buy in enough to that plan to have it produce adequate income. Most Canadians actually are going to have 7 or 8 different employers in their working life if they're young now, and it's almost certainly the case that many of those employers will not have company pension plans, and even if they did, they wouldn't have the same plan. So CPP provides a really important benefit in terms of its full portability. So that's an advantage of the plan. Every working Canadian is in the plan. I think that's another advantage in terms of spreading risk. It's been proven to have some of the lowest administration fees, and therefore it gets the best value for money in terms of actually producing not having your money shuffled off to go to those who are administering the plan. It has the added advantage when you have every working Canadian in that plan, and everyone who has worked living off a portion of that plan, that it has a certain kind of political backing that also goes towards mitigating risk, because we really are all in the CPP together in a way that we're not in any particular private pension plan. So I think Canadians can feel confidence that the savings of theirs that are held with the CPP are less likely to fail than many of the private options that are out there, and it has another benefit, a benefit that's even rarer today, even in the case of Canadians who do have private sector pension plans, which is that it provides a defined benefit, which is greatly helpful when you're trying to project what income it is that you're going to have in retirement, and therefore also how much you have to save in order to go above and beyond what your pension plan, whether it's CPP or the combination of CPP and a private pension, will provide. If you're on a defined contribution plan and you don't know what that plan is going to produce once you do finally stop working, then it's a lot harder to know exactly how much you have to save. So that's another benefit of the Canada Pension Plan, Mr. Speaker. And so I do applaud the effort to raise the benefit that comes out of the CPP. I think there's a few things to say about that quickly. One is that I really do doubt whether it's enough. In fact, I don't think it is, and I would like to see the government go further in terms of enhancing the Canada Pension Plan, because I do think it's a great option for most working Canadians who aren't making a lot of money to be able not just to save for their own retirement in a well-working, proven fund, but also to have their employer make a matching contribution to that. So when we talk about Canadians taking charge of their own future and saving their own money through TFSA, for instance, we don't talk about what's not there, which is employer contributions. And so that's another important aspect of the CPP. So I would like to see it further enhanced. This is a good first step, and it's certainly not worth opposing simply because it's not ideal. But I would like to see the government push harder for an increase in that, because I think it's important. And we also know that this doesn't do anything for seniors right now. So I think it's important because it actually does a lot for young people over the course of their working life. And my children right now, who are 3 years old and 4 months old, are going to benefit from this, and they're going to see that benefit. And I'm quite happy to do that for them. But for people in my parents' generation that are just looking at retiring, there are other measures that are going to be needed in order to do something for them. I do want to take a moment, Mr. Speaker, just to address some of the arguments I've heard in the chamber today. The first is the idea that somehow the Canada Pension Plan is a payroll tax. I simply don't agree with that. That may be true as a term of art for accounting, and that may be where it's recorded on the ledger, but for ordinary Canadians who are going into work every day and are working, yes, to put food on the table today, but also for that period in their life that they look forward to where they're not going into work every day, the CPP contribution on the part of their employer is part of the wage package. And that's part of what they're going into work for as well, Mr. Speaker. So I do take exception to those who would continually refer to this as a tax. It's not a tax. It's part of the wage package. And I would say, Mr. Speaker, that it is up to Canadians to take charge of their own future and to decide how they're going to save for retirement. And a perfectly legitimate decision on the part of Canadians is to decide to do that saving through the CPP, to do it collectively, to have a plan that's better than the options than they get through the private sector, and to decide that we're in this together, and to elect a government that is going to implement a mandatory public pension. And that's a perfectly acceptable decision. And so that's something that I take them to have done in the last election. Again, I would like to see it go further. I think many Canadians would like to see this proposal go further. But part of the decision that was made was to reject the idea that somehow each Canadian is on their own individually, and that they have to make choices as an individual, but that we could make a collective decision to enhance our public pension system, and that would be a good way for us all to save for our retirement, Mr. Speaker, and to do it in a way that's fair to each Canadian, because when we talk about individual Canadians just saving for their retirement and some of the options that are available to them, what's missed in that, Mr. Speaker, is that Canadians with more money have more options to invest in more and as you hit certain income thresholds, you can gain access to certain funds and other clubs, if you will, Mr. Speaker, that provide better returns. So it's a fiction to say that all Canadians are equal when it comes to the private retirement investment market, and that we all have the same options, Mr. Speaker. One of the things that the Canada Pension Plan recognizes is that we all need to be treated fairly. So it's another reason to support the plan, Mr. Speaker.
Questions et commentaires, questions and comments? The honourable member for Winnipeg North.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as I've indicated to other colleagues of the member, is that appreciative of the fact that the Democrats have acknowledged that Bill C-26 is a good bill. And at the end of the day, I want to reflect on the fact that we had provincial jurisdictions from all regions of the country that were able to come into an agreement that this is the type of legislation that is forward-thinking. It will, in fact, provide for, in a very real and tangible way, retirement monies for those that are working today and are going to be in the workforce for a while now. My question more so, I guess, is dealing with the other aspect. There's a lot of discussion about poverty, seniors in poverty, and yes, the overall numbers have gone down. And we have seen in this last number of months with the Minister of Finance making an announcement that we're going to be substantially increasing the GIS, where we'll be lifting literally thousands of more seniors out of poverty, and it's through the guaranteed income supplement. And I guess pose the question to the members. Today we're talking about the Canada Pension Program. There are three fundamental pension public programs, the OAS, GIS, and the CPP. Does he have any thoughts that he'd like to express in regards to the other two that the bill does not deal with?
The honourable member for Elmwood-Transcona.
Well, first of all, I would just I would concur with the member that, you know, I mean, one of the important aspects of this is that the provinces are on side, and I would just recall, for the sake of the chamber, that provincial premiers for a long time had been wanting to meet about the Canada Pension Plan with the federal government, and the previous government, you know, wasn't willing to engage in that conversation. So I think it was with a sense of relief and gratitude that they got together and were finally able to talk about that. Again, I think we could have done more with that opportunity, and want to see more done in the future. Just as I would like to see more done on the OAS and the GIS. So there have been, you know, there's been talk about some increases. I think part of that conversation has to start from, you know, what really is an acceptable level of income in order to be able to get an apartment here in the current Canadian economic context, and given the cost of food, we need to figure out what that number is, and then start having a serious conversation about what it is we need to be able to get Canadian seniors to have that income, because it's just unacceptable to me. I've seen it myself in Elmwood-Transcona. I've been in the living rooms of women who are not working, and have shown me that their cupboards are bare and their fridge is bare, and all of their disposable income is just going into paying rent. So to me, that's just unacceptable, and I know that we have the resources in Canada to make sure that people aren't living in those circumstances. We have to start talking about how we're going to do it.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Sarnia-Lambton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague for his speech. I want to talk about a couple of risks that occurred to me. One risk occurred to me when one of the other NDP colleagues was speaking about how when new governments come in, they sort of overturn what the previous government did. And I thought to myself, gee, you know, what if this government was in for a number of years and collected everybody's money, and then the next government just turfed the whole plan? So that would be one risk. Another risk occurred to me when someone was talking about how there's a possibility that they might take the fund money and actually invest it in infrastructure, with Gerald Butts influencing that after he ran Ontario into the ground. So I wondered if the member could comment on those risks.
The honourable member for Elmwood-Transcona.
Sure. I mean, I think the idea of a reliable public pension plan requires that it will be responsibly managed. But I think that there's a great record of success when it comes to the Canada Pension Plan that shows it has been successfully managed to date. If there's proposals on the table that would imply unsuccessful management, and then those are bad proposals, but they don't preclude the idea of expanding the Canada Pension Plan and expanding its benefit. That's a question then about how the fund should be managed. And I would say that I think it's important also to mention and to talk about the fact that there is a lot of irresponsible things done with people's retirement savings by private investment funds and by the banks that they invest with. And so it's a fiction to pretend that somehow there's a big risk by investing your retirement savings under the Canada Pension Plan, and that somehow if you then went to your bank and deposited with your bank or some other kind of private financial planner, that it's perfectly safe. I would argue Canadians have, on the evidence, a lot more to worry about from private investment options than they do the Canada Pension Plan, which has a public and long track record, Mr. Speaker.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for